She was the most powerful woman in Hungary. They called her a noble. They called her a countess. They also called her a vampire. Not because she bit necks, but because she bled girls like livestock, hundreds of them. And here's the thing, she almost got away with it.
She was a peasant girl, 16 maybe. She arrived at the castle with a bundle of clothes and a prayer in her mouth. The lady of the manor, Countess Báthory, smiled politely, welcomed her, promised refinement. That same night, her screams echoed from the lower hall. The next morning, her bed was empty. No one asked, no one answered. She was never seen again. Born into wealth, educated, fluent in 4 languages, Elizabeth Báthory wasn't just nobility, she was practically untouchable. She married at 15, ran vast estates, and when her husband died in battle, she didn't shrink, she took control. What no one knew was that behind the velvet curtains, a ritual was forming. A ritual soaked in blood. At first it was punishments. A girl caught stealing a ribbon? Beaten until her fingernails tore off. One too slow with the brush? Stabbed with hairpins. But something shifted. Elizabeth began smiling while they screamed. Sometimes she wouldn't stop. And when blood stained her skin, she didn't flinch. She watched it dry. And some say she began to enjoy how it looked. The famous legend that Elizabeth Báthory bathed in the blood of virgins to stay young? It's dramatic, visually horrific, and likely exaggerated. But here's the uncomfortable truth. When dozens of servants and witnesses all say they saw her covered in blood, when victims are found nude, drained, and mutilated, you start to wonder, even if the baths were symbolic, how much of it was metaphor, and how much wasn't? She didn't act alone. Her closest servants became accomplices. A wet nurse, a dwarf jester, a maid with a cruel streak. They became her tools. Some held the girls down, some fetched instruments, some helped bury the bodies under floors, behind walls, in the orchard. They were rewarded with jewelry, food, status, and they stayed silent because serving a killer was safer than becoming the next girl on the table. At its peak, Chak-Tisé Castle wasn't a home. It was a death factory. Girls arrived in carts, lured by lies, promises of work or nobility. The screams became daily. The walls absorbed them. Guards rotated shifts to ignore what they heard. Witnesses later described girls stripped and bled slowly into basins. Sharp irons inserted into mouths, nostrils, and worse. Victims forced to eat their own flesh before being executed. One survivor was found hiding naked in a laundry bin, too weak to speak. She died the next day. Like all tyrants, Elizabeth got cocky. Peasant girls? Disposable. But she grew bolder, started inviting noble daughters for finishing lessons. That was her mistake. One disappeared, then another. And suddenly, very powerful people were missing their children. And no amount of bribes could clean that kind of blood. In the dead of winter, Count Thurzo and his men arrived at Chak-Tisé Castle. Snow clung to the trees like ash. The air was silent, not quiet, dead. They had no idea what waited behind those stone walls. Not really.
They burst through the gates. Steel met silence. No guards stopped them. No servants greeted them. Just a long hallway and the smell. Not rot, not blood. Both, mixed, thick, hanging in the air like a curse. They kicked in the first door. And they saw hell. Bodies stacked like butchered pigs. Some nude, some bound, some too mutilated to tell if they'd ever had names. A bucket of blood sat in the corner, congealed. One guard vomited into his helmet. Another crossed himself, lips trembling. They moved deeper into the castle. Behind the curtain in the main chamber, they found her. She was standing over a young girl who lay half naked on a wooden bench, arms stretched out, blood trickling from cuts that hadn't yet stopped bleeding. The girl was still alive, just barely. She turned her head, eyes wide, mouth open, but no sound came out, like her screams had already been drained with everything else. Elizabeth Báthory looked up, her dress splattered in crimson, her hands red and steady. She didn't flinch, didn't run. She simply wiped a spot of blood from her ring, smoothed her skirt, and folded her hands. Her arrest was not violent. The soldiers surrounded her, but she didn't resist. She looked at them, not with fear, not even disdain, but with curiosity. And then she spoke. Not to plead, not to confess. Just one question. Will they remember me as beautiful? That was it. That was all she cared about. Not the girls, not the blood, not the graves still warm beneath the floorboards. Just her legacy, her face, her myth. She wasn't put on trial. She was too rich, too noble. Her accomplices? Tortured, executed. One had her fingers torn off with hot pincers. But Elizabeth, they bricked her into her own bedroom. One small slit for food. No windows, no visitors. 4 years. She died in that tomb. Some say her body rotted untouched. Others say they found her perfect and smiling. So, what was she? A monster? A vampire? A noblewoman driven mad by power? Or a woman who simply learned that nobody stops the beautiful until the blood pools too high to ignore? Maybe the truth is this. The worst horrors in history don't come with fangs or claws. They come with pearls and invitations and soft hands that know exactly where to cut.